Hello everyone, welcome to iFashy. Today's tutorial will be teaching us how to draft this beautiful Princess Dart Bustier with this curved neckline. It's a very beautiful and unique neckline and also very easy to make. So if this is something you're interested in, let's get right into this tutorial. This is the pattern paper that we'll be using. I've gone ahead to place it on fold. I'm folding my pattern paper because I want to be able to open it up and show you guys how it looks after drafting. But if you are drafting for personal use, you don't necessarily need to put your pattern paper on fold. And here is the velvet fabric that I'll be using to make this dress as well. At the end of this tutorial, we're going to be showing us how we cut on this velvet fabric. So the first thing I'm going to do on my pattern paper now is to mark out a straight line at the beginning of my paper, which will serve as my shoulder line. On this line is where I'll start taking all my measurements downwards from. Now I'm going to place my tape on this line and take my bust point measurement. From my shoulder to my bust is 10 inches. I've marked that down. And the next I'll mark is 13 inches, which is my under bust. And then I'll also mark my front waist measurement, which is 17.5. I'll mark out all these points and rule a straight line on them, and then I'll label the lines so that we'll know what they're for. Now that we have the waistline, the under bust line, and the bust line out, we're going to continue taking our measurements. If you're making a top, from the waist, you just take the length of your top. But if it is a dress, you're going to determine the length from this point. This neckline can be made on a dress or a top. But for this tutorial, we'll be making a dress. So the next line we're going to be marking out is the hip line starting from the waist. So I'll place my tape on the waistline and go down with 9.5, which is my hip point, and I'll mark a line there. After the hip line, you're going to go ahead and determine the length of your dress. So after marking out the hip line, I went down with 20 inches from the waist to mark the length of this short dress. So now we have the length, the hip, the waist, the under bust, and the bust line out. The next line we're going to take out is our chest line. Usually some people just go up with 2 inches from the bust point to get a chest line, but the formula I use is to divide my bust by 6 and add 1.5 to get my chest line. And that gave me 7.6, which I marked there. The next thing now is to go to the first line on our paper, which is the shoulder line, to mark out our shoulder measurement divided by 2. So my shoulder measurement divided by 2 is 8 inches. I marked it on that point, and then I also repeated the same 8 inches on my chest line. Now we're going to take our shoulder slope, which is 1 inch downwards from the shoulder line, and then we'll connect from there to meet our chest line. After that, we'll come in with 3 inches from the beginning of our paper for the neck measurement, where we're going to be connecting this shoulder slope to. Then we're going to come to the armhole point and divide this line you have here by 2 and mark out your armhole curve. After that, we'll now go ahead and take our bust span measurement. The bust span measurement is also known as the nipple to nipple measurement. So you divide that by 2 and impute the answer on the bust line, the under bust line, and on the waistline, and then you extend it downwards. First of all, I'm extending it downward with 6 inches in case you're making a top. But if it's a dress, you're going to have to extend it all the way down. After marking out the bust span measurement, we're going to take our dart on the under bust line. I'll be using 2 inches to tighten my under bust. My bust circumference is 38 inches and I'll be using 2 inches to tighten the under bust. And for this under bust tightening, you can decide to share your darts equally on both sides. You can also decide to take the bigger part towards the side front because it is the side front that carries most parts of our bust. Right? So for these 2 inches that I'm taking as my under bust tightening, I'm going to take 1.25 on the side front, and then on the center front, I'll take 0.75. After marking out the dart points, you're going to use your curve ruler to curve the side front parts. Only the side front you use the curve ruler. Here is a mistake, I later corrected it. For the center front, please use a straight ruler to connect that point to the bust line. Now, I'm going to extend my dart downwards. Remember I said if it's a dress, you're going to extend your dart down to the end of the dress. But if it's a top, this 6 inches dart extension is just enough. After extending the bust span measurement downwards, I also extended the dart downwards. We're going to be cutting off those parts. Now, let's go back to the upper part of the dress to work on the neckline of this dress. Now, from this bust point, we're going to make a connection to meet our armhole curve. Remember to curve your armhole at this point, and then you connect from this bust line with our curve ruler to meet the midpoint of our armhole line. For this connection, I'm using a pencil first because we will not be using this first one. We're going to come downwards from this midpoint with 1 inch and then go outwards with 1 inch. If you don't go out with 1 inch, your side front will be shorter than your center front. So now after marking out that point, you now use your curve ruler to connect from the bust to meet the 1 inch that we just extended. This will be the line that we'll be following. And then on this chest line, I'll take my bust measurement divided by 4, and then we'll now have a new armhole curve, right? Now, this is the point I'll now use my marker to make this connection towards the bust point, because this is the part we'll be using for the side front. The center front will carry that first line, but this down line is where you'll be cutting your side front through. With this, it's just like we have a small dart on that armhole point. Now let's continue. The next thing now is to determine how high you want this curved neckline to be. As you can see on your screen, the height and the shape of this neckline differs. It completely depends on your preference, right? You can place your tape from your chest upwards to determine the point you want it to get to, or you just come down with 2.5 inches from the shoulder line. You know, usually for a round neck, we come down with 3 inches, but this is higher, right? So either you use your measurements or you just come down with 2 or 2.5 inches, depends on how high you want it to be. So we'll go ahead now and make the curve from that 2.5 to meet the midpoint of our armhole curve. And after the neck is out, we'll now go ahead and take the body measurement on all of these lines that we've marked out. The bust measurement divided by 4 on the bust line, the under bust measurement divided by 4 on the under bust line. Remember to impute this dart that we have here after taking your measurement. On the hip line, you take your hip measurement divided by 4 and then replace these 2 inches that we took out as our under bust dart. And then on the full length line as well, I'm going to remove 1 inch from the hip line and impute my answer there as well. So I'm going to go ahead now and connect these lines together. Now for this hip part, the first one I'm marking is for a straight dress. That's why I'm going to use a pencil to mark out that line, because this is not a very straight dress. I'm going to make it an exaggerated hip dress. That's why I'm using a pencil, because this is not the line I'll be cutting through. Now, in order to achieve that exaggerated hip dress, we're going to add 2 inches to our hip line and then 3 inches to the full length line. Remember what we did here the first time to get this straight dress? We took our hip circumference divided by 4 and then replaced the dart. Now, I'm going to add the inches I need to make the hip exaggerated. Whatever it is you added on the hip line, you're going to add 1 inch extra on the full length line so that the flare will go down straight. Now after marking this out, I'll now use my marker to make the connection from the waist down to the full length of my dress. If you're making a straight dress, you're going to cut through the penciled line. But for this exaggerated hip dress, we'll be cutting through this other line that we used a marker. You see how simple this dress is to make? We are already done with this front part. The only remaining thing now is to take out our side bust darts. Now, remember our front waist measurement is 17.5 from the shoulder to the front waist, right? For my back waist measurement, I have 16 inches. So we're going to be removing that 1.5 inches so that the front and the back will align on the sides when we join it. So the difference you have from your front and back waist measurements is what you're going to remove as your side bust dart. So for this neckline, I went ahead to adjust it a little bit because it's not as curvy as I wanted it to be. So now that we're done with the front drafting, I'm going to use my tracing wheel to trace out these lines we have here so that it will show on the other side of my paper. And then I'll go ahead and use my marker to mark out all the lines that we have on this other side so that it will be showing on the other side. I'll speed this up now so that we don't waste much of our time. We're just repeating everything we did on this side. And like I said before, if you're drafting it for a personal use, you don't need to put your pattern paper on fold. I did this so I can open up my pattern and show you how the final result of the dress looks like. Now, this is what we have on both sides of our paper. Remember this correction that I made earlier? I mentioned you only use your curve ruler on the side front. On the center front, go ahead and use a straight ruler so that the curve on the center front will go smooth. And now this is why I also say you should use a pencil when you're drafting, because pencil is easier to clean. I use a marker so that it will be visible for you guys to see. Now this is what it's supposed to look like. The curve on the center front is going seamless while the curve on the side front is curvy, because that's where the fullest part of the bust is. Now here is a full view of the front part of this dress that we just drafted. We're going to go ahead now and keep it aside and draft the back. The back is very simple. I've gone ahead to mark out the major lines that we have on this back piece, just like everything we did for front. We have our shoulder line at the top of the paper, and then we've connected the armhole as well. Next we have the bust line, the waistline, and the hip line, and then the full length. Remember, this back waist is 16 and the front was 17.5. So kindly take your front and back measurements and impute what you have. Now for this back pattern paper, the first thing we also did at the beginning of the paper was to remove our zipper allowance. That is if you're using a zipper for your dress. But if it is a corset loop you want to use, you just go ahead and start drafting from the beginning of your paper. But if it is a zipper, remember to remove your 1.5 or 2 inches zipper allowance at the beginning of your paper. Now that all these lines are out, we're going to take our nipple to nipple measurements on the back. So you're going to impute your 4 inches on the bust line, the waistline, and then extend it downwards with 6 inches for that extension. That's if you're making a top. But if it's a dress and you want the center back and the side back to be separate, you're going to go ahead and extend these darts all the way down. Now on the waistline, we're going to take a 1.5 inch dart. I'll share this 1.5 inch on both sides, and then I'll connect it to meet the bust line and the dart extension with my straight ruler. Now the next thing is to determine the depth of our back. You're going to go ahead and take your bust measurements on this chest line, just like you see me doing on your screen, and then you use your ruler to make a curve from the bust measurement on the chest line to meet the bust line on the zipper allowance line. And this will be the start point of our back. We don't need this upper yoke part. And after marking out the depth of the back, you just go ahead and take your waist measurements on the waistline. Remember to impute the 1.5 inch dart we took out, and then the hip measurement on the hip line. Your hip divided by 4. You impute your answer there. There's no dart to replace there, right? The only thing we're going to do is to add our 2 inches hip extension. Remember, we're making an exaggerated dress. Well, if it's a straight dress you're making, just take your hip measurement on this point. And then we're also going to repeat the same thing we did for front. The hip measurement on the full neckline, and then you add 1 inch to what you added on the hip line. If you added 2 for the extension on the hip, you're going to add 3 for the extension on the full length. And after connecting it together, this is what you're going to have. Now on this waistline, remember, if you're not using a zipper, you're going to go ahead and come inwards with 1.5 or 1 inch, depends on how wide, how open you want your eyelets to be on the back, and then you mark out that point, right? But this is a zipper dress, okay? So the next thing I'm going to do now is to snatch this zipper a little bit. On this waistline, from the zipper allowance, which is the beginning of my pattern paper, I'm going to come inwards with 0.5 and mark that 0.5. Use my straight ruler to connect it upwards to the end of the dress and downwards towards the hip. This small 0.5, we're going to cut it off, and trust me, it makes a difference in cinching your zipper. Now that we're done with this back piece, we're going to go ahead and cut out. Remember, I have only one piece of my back, okay? For the front piece, this is what we have. We're going to go ahead and cut. Watch closely and see how I am cutting. When you're cutting the side front, do not cut straight up until you have closed your side bust dart, because after closing that side bust dart, the lines will not align again. So you have to close your side bust dart and use your ruler and marker to align the lines before you cut out the excess paper you have there. Now watch closely. After tearing the side bust dart open, I'm using my gum. You can go ahead and use a pin. I'll gum it down and then I'll align this broken line we have here. From the waist to the armhole, make sure it's straight. Then you can now go ahead and cut off the excess paper. And trust me, it's this simple. Now when you put the side front and the center front together, make sure to check it is aligned. As you can see on your screen, my center fronts and the side fronts are well aligned. The next thing we're going to do now is to go ahead and cut out on fabric. If you have watched to this point and you haven't clicked that subscribe button, please support us by subscribing to our channel and also like and share this video so that it will be recommended to others who would be needing this tutorial. Remember our green velvet fabric that we showed us at the beginning of the video? This is what we have now. I've gone ahead to iron our hairstay into the fabric. In order to work very well with velvet fabric, endeavor to iron your interface to the fabric first before cutting. It will stress you more when you iron after cutting. Before I start cutting, this velvet is just a base. I'm going to laminate this chantilly lace on top of this velvet. And to do that, you're just going to arrange the chantilly on top of the velvet like this. Make sure it is neatly arranged, no part of the velvet or the chantilly is squeezed. And then you introduce your hemming gum. You can use this hemming gum I'm holding here, or you use the one that comes in yardage. There's the one you can buy 2 to 3 yards and just spread it. It's very wide. You spread it under the chantilly and iron, but please do not iron on top of the chantilly directly. Make sure to cover with another fabric before you press. So I'm going to be doing this off camera because it's going to take a lot of time. So the next time you're going to be seeing this fabric, we would have ironed this chantilly on top of the velvet already. So for this structured dress, I've gone ahead to double the hairstay to the fabric before cutting. Then when you're cutting, remember to add your sewing allowance because there is no sewing allowance on our pattern paper. So this is what we have now. We're going to be stopping this video here. And in the part 2 of this video, we'll be dropping how we joined all the pieces together to make this beautiful dress with exaggerated hips and a curved neckline. Kindly stay tuned for the part 2 of this video and I'll see you in the next one.